What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the channel. And no, the title is not clickbait. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to get a free jet ski and put some money in your pocket at the same time. Stick around. Alright, so like I said, today's video is not clickbait. Simply and plainly put in perspective, this is a business opportunity where you can make a good amount of money. Now, of course, I'm not going to say it's 100% free. You always have to invest to get something out of it. However, there is a good possibility for you to make a large chunk of money, and I want to show you exactly how that is. So follow me here. This particular jet ski, I believe, is a 2009. I picked it up really cheap for 500 bucks actually. In good running condition, this ski is approximately $4,500 or so. And there's a lot of different ways for you guys to make money by buying this. And this doesn't have to be a jet ski. It just happens to be that we're going to do a build on this in the same series. So I'm showing this particular ski itself. But in this case, we're going to say that the ski is probably about a $4,500 jet ski, and I picked it up for 500 bucks. Now, in general, you're not always going to get that deal. So we'll talk a little bit more about why I got that deal here in a little bit. But for now, what I want to talk to you about is exactly how you're going to make the money and how do you get this jet ski for free. So let's just say in general, you're a shrewd negotiator and you get a pretty good deal on this thing for about 3,500 bucks, and you know it's a $4,500 jet ski. Well, yeah, you're making 1,000 bucks, I guess, if you resold it, but that's not really what you want to do. It's not enough money to really be worth your time. But what you didn't know probably is this particular jet ski is worth about $7,500 in parts. Much like many things, things are worth a lot more when they're taken apart. That leaves you a savings after some incurred costs of, obviously, get rid of, let's say, eBay fees or whatever you're going to use it for, or use it on. You're going to probably profit and about double your money, so you're going to make about $3,500. Now, again, there's a lot of different ways you can go for this. You can go ahead and part everything out, or you can keep the ski. The main core of what's worth the money is right there, and that is the engine and drivetrain. Now, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be using the engine out of this to sell for parts, because the parts alone, just for the engine and the supercharger and a couple of components that go with that, roughly $5,500 or so. And so essentially what happens is, let's say I did pay $3,500 for this, and I get $5,500 out of the engine. Well, now I have this jet ski sitting here with no engine in it, but I have $2,000 ahead in my pocket. So I put the $3,500 back in the bank, I've got $2,000 in my pocket, and I've got a jet ski sitting here that essentially costs me nothing. Well, what do I do with it? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do with it. We're going to put in an engine from the ski pictured above. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wow, that ski is a total piece of... And you're probably right, it is. It's probably the roughest one I've ever seen, but it does clean up pretty good. I've already cleaned it up. And the motor inside, just to give you a heads up, is locked up. So I do have to rebuild that motor. And as odd as it seems, I'm going to put that motor in here. And while no, it's not going to be 250 horsepower like it was, it's still going to be like 90 horsepower. And it'll still run 35 miles an hour. Hopefully. And we got that whole jet ski for nothing. It's just a little bit of time and effort. Like I said, there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You could just be parting this thing out completely and just putting money in your pocket. You could be doing it the way I'm doing it, which I think is going to be the fun way, doing the kind of the engine swap. And then you could do other things like just rebuild it yourself and sell it. So there's a lot of different things that you can do. Most likely you're not going to find too many situations where you pick one up like this for 500 bucks. It's just really a steal. It really is. But you could see the potential profit. If I wanted to part this thing out and saying it's worth 7,500 bucks, it was simply needing a $200 part, so that's $7,300, and I paid $500. You can see my profit margin there. Pretty darn good. So I've done this for many years. I don't do it a whole lot anymore. I do it when I want to have fun and make a little bit of good content for you guys and doing weird swaps, which is what we're doing today. Right now, what we want to do is walk around, just look at the condition of the ski itself. I do have a lot of the parts, like you see, that go right here in the mirror, which I, like a dumbass, broke off. Not a big deal, we'll be able to fix that, but most everything's there. We are missing the bumper edges here. Not a whole lot of expense there. I have brand new mats that I want to put this. It doesn't need it, but there'll be a lot of customization. You guys will see that to come in the future here. You can see the jet pump was taken out. I got all that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's all in good shape. Overall, the ski is in pretty decent shape. A little tear on the seat here. Again, we'll address all that little stuff here. This ski has about 200 hours on it, and literally the engine is impeccable condition. In fact, the only thing that was wrong with the supercharger clutches were bad, so that was the $200 in parts that it actually needed, which we won't have to worry about anyways. We're going to get rid of those. But yeah, so this is the ski itself. I've already got the engine out of it. I didn't take it out, the former owner did. It's one of the reasons I chose not to rebuild this and fully part it out. I wanted to put it together, But typically I won't buy a ski if it's been completely taken apart because, one, you don't know if everything's there. Two, you don't know the true problem until you get it completely dissected. And it could be problematic doing it that way, so I try not to. But we're gonna get this thing in the shop now. We gotta start tearing down the Sea-Doo, get the engine and everything out of there. We got some work to do, and like I said, its motor needs rebuilt, and that ski literally was basically free. I actually had it laying back here in the corner of the yard and just gave the whole away for free because it was an eyesore, as you saw. So, time to move forward, guys. Okay, guys, so moving forward, we got the ski out towards the garage now. I got a little bit of work to do. I still have electrical that has to come out of this thing here to include the fuel pump. The only thing that's really staying is probably the gauges that you see right there and the 4 controls, at least one of them. Everything else, it will be coming out. I guess we'll probably keep the bilge pump as well. Like I said, the fuel pump's got to come out. What'll probably end up happening is I'll probably end up putting a block off plate where the fuel pump is, and then we'll run the regular fuel pump, which is about the same size as that secondary cap right there out of that hole. But I also have a pool of gasoline, so it would be my guess that when I pull the motor, this disconnected line that's coming from the fuel pump right here, probably from the heat pressurized because it's like 200,000 degrees here the last week, it's probably pumping this thing out right into the hole. It stinks, it's strong, it's got to go, so that's going to be the first thing I do, followed by taking out all this electrical wiring right here so we have a good open clean slate. And then we'll start doing some measuring for our Sea-Doo. Now I know what you guys are probably thinking, why didn't I use a Yamaha? Well, that's a good question. See, I was supposed to use a Yamaha 1100. That was what this swap was going to be. 120 horsepower, the thing would have moved pretty darn good. Problem is Facebook Marketplace and people screwing you over. I won't get much into that, but I had one located and ready to go. I was about 20 minutes from picking it up on an hour drive when the seller sold to somebody else. So it is what it is. So I got this one. We're putting in a Sea-Doo. Let's move forward. Okay, and moving forward, I got the main harness out, as you'll see. It was a little tricky. It ran all the way up to the front here to obviously all the gauges and everything. And then there is a security module over here I had to disconnect and take out. And then the last thing that I had to remove right here was actually the throttle. Now, this thing doesn't have a throttle by line or an old school cable style throttle. This is actually a fly-by-wire style throttle, which is what you find in like newer cars. So it essentially means that your throttle is controlled by the computer, and you physically control this module here to tell the computer how much throttle you're giving it. So obviously we don't need any of that, so that's got to get ripped out, but that's okay, because if you look at the right control right here, we don't have cruise control anymore, or I don't think we will, or any kind of wake mode, so all this stuff can get taken off anyways. In fact, I actually have an old Kawasaki thumb or finger throttle that's almost identical to that. That I think will bolt right on here in perfect place. So I'm going to start by taking this off right here. I don't need it. I did drain all the fuel. It was going to be a little bit of a headache, so that's gone. And essentially what I'm trying to do is get rid of every single thing in here that is not going to be used. So I might try to stick with the original just muffler can itself if I can adapt that from a smaller to a larger. Shouldn't make too big of a difference. And then other than that, I think everything else is staying in here with the exception of the fuel pump, which I will pull out. Hopefully I don't have to take off this whole lid to do that. If I have to, I'll probably do some painting, as you can see it, that needs done, but that's okay. So yeah, let's move forward and see if I got to take the fuel pump out to the top or if I can get it out from right there. Okay, so handlebars are off, at least the padding, and the reason why was I was able to easily get the throttle actuator out of there. However, the plug that went to the right control was so big that it had to come through this tiny little hole that you see right there. I actually had to remove all that stuff, get this thing loose right here to get that pried out. As far as the gas tank, you know, I could probably mess with it. Then I decided, you know what, I'd rather have access to the whole tank when I have to start doing the custom fuel side and putting the stuff back in. So what I decided to go ahead and do was loosen this right here. It was simply 2 bolts from right here, 2 bolts right there, and then there is your fill hose right here that goes into the back right there. You got 1 flathead screw, and now technically speaking this thing should lift, yeah, and come right out. So look at, there's our fuel tank. Now the good news here is not only can I clean this and get this repaired and done what I need to do, now I can officially flush and clean the tank correctly, so I don't have to worry about gum and crap being in the bottom of that. So let me get this thing off and we'll start working on converting it. Okay, and so I got our cap off right now. If you look down in there, there's actually 2 rubber pieces. I have no idea what they go to, but you can kind of see all the grime floating around in there that we need to get out of there, to include obviously the fuel tank, the fuel pump. And I have a few different fill and X that are going to go in this spot now. These are actually from Yamaha, from I believe Waverunner 3s. That'll fit right down in there. We have a reserve and we have an on, so it's perfect. The only thing it's missing is the fuel lever sender, which this one actually has. I believe this is a Sea-Doo. Unfortunately, the reading element is missing on there, and though I do have one, these are often known to fail, and it's actually a little too short if you look at that, so it won't pick up from the bottom of the tank, which we would like it to. So, with that said, I'm gonna pull this thing off right now, get that out, make a block off plate here, and then get this tank cleaned out. Okay, and so quick update, I had to do a little stretching to get this thing over top right here, but it worked and it's on there super tight. It's done a really, really good job, because if you look at it, it goes about an inch from the very, very bottom, if you can see that, the camera will focus. So actually it was about perfect, because you obviously never want to suck off the bottom if you don't have to. Got most of the grime out of there, there's a couple specks of nothing, but overall most of it's good. Now the last thing I have to do is I went ahead and cut out an aluminum plate and drilled it to match this thing, and I have an O-ring that's going underneath that, so we'll have the O-ring, the new plate, and then this plate over top of it, and the bolts or the nuts will hold it back on, so it'll be good and sealed. So that's it for the gas tank. Alright, so there you guys have it. There is the fuel tank complete. It's getting thrown in right now. Alright, and the gasket is now back in. If you guys are wondering what O-ring that I used for the top of that tank, I actually used one of the old square top end O-rings from the Sea-Doo that we just took apart. So there it is. Okay, and so now moving forward, it's time to take some of those Sea-Doo parts that we have finished and start adapting them for the first time into this hull. Now, there's a lot of things to take in consideration. We need to know exactly how this engine is going to be placed, because that drive shaft has to line up with this drive shaft, or I should say the PTO coupler on the engine has to line up with this drive shaft. And there's a lot of variance there, where that engine sits this way, where it sits this way. So what I'm going to have to do right now is I'm going to set the motor in there, and at some point we're going to have to stick the jet pump back in there and figure out exactly what we're going to do as far as coupling the engine with that. Now, do I use the Yamaha couplers or do I use Sea-Doo couplers? So there's a lot of different options that we have, and we're going to move forward with that right now. Let me drop this engine in and we'll see where it goes from there. Okay, so it's me from the past, and what I want to do is I wanted to show you a real quick video of how bad this engine actually is. Again, the ski doesn't look terrible because I cleaned it. I'm going to try to, if I didn't already, add a picture of that. It was like the worst. There's actually still baby mice living in it. Don't worry, they're all alive. I don't want to kill anybody, so I'm leaving them in there. I'm not going to show that because I don't get anybody triggered. But nonetheless, this motor is so bad, and it is locked up. If you look at the pistons that came out of this thing, they've been replaced before, but they were physically locked up, not just from sitting since 2009. So it's in pretty bad shape. I've got these loose so far. You can see I've been tearing my gloves up trying to get this thing done. This one's partially loose. The second I hit the start, though, it'll turn and something catches in the bottom. I think there's a piece of the old piston busted and laying inside there. So I got to get that out to make sure that it doesn't scrape and wrap around the crankshaft and split the case. So we're getting there. I'm going to try my best to get this engine to work because it was free. It didn't cost us anything. And it would be minimal amount of money if I threw a couple pistons in and bored it out myself. So I think that we have the ability to do that. That said, give me a little bit of time. We'll try to finish freeing this thing up. Okay, and just as a quick update, I've split the case completely all the way down to the bare block, and I'm cleaning up the best I can. Pressure washer didn't do the greatest job, but it got a lot of the grime out. Now we got basically a wire wheel, which is right here. We're cleaning everything up to try to get it as clean as possible before I put it back together, and obviously at some point we're going to have to paint the engine. But for most part, I want to make sure that the block itself is clean for reliability. So let's get this thing done real quick. Okay, so moving forward, we needed to clean the carbs. They were full of oil for whatever reason, and total nasty, disgusting, probably rat poop. I don't know. They were pretty gross. It took a lot to get them cleaned out. I got all the gum out. I replaced all the bolts because they were rusting, so I got all that done now. Got everything cleaned out as far as orifices and jets, and now it's time to put new rebuild kits in these things. I'm going to go ahead and do that, then we should be good to go. Okay, and so here are our carbs. Now, they are a little ugly, obviously, because the paint is chipping and whatnot. I've got all the mated surfaces cleaned up. I don't so much care about painting the entire carbs because I don't want to take a chance of getting paint somehow or another in the carbs. It's just not worth it to me. Plus, they're covered up. You don't see it by the airbox. I don't really care. However, it's got all new gaskets, new filters, new bolts holding the parts inside, and then obviously new fuel lines, as you can see here. I like to use the clear because they harden a lot like the original Tempo lines, the gray ones that we just took off. However, they don't get gummy like the original ones, so they work pretty well. The only one I typically use a different, more silicone type hose on is the one basically coming into it. Not so much all the ones that are connected to the engine. So don't always do that. Sometimes I do. I like the clear because you can see when the fuel is basically flowing through it. So these are good to go. It's time to move forward. All right, and so moving forward, I gotta get this desk cleaned. I can't stand when I have tools just packed up like this in parts. I know what you're thinking. No, that is not apple juice. I know it looks just like apple juice. That's actually gasoline. For whatever reason, I figured this out years ago. The apple juice containers hold fuel really, really well, and there's absolutely nothing better than pure gas to clean parts with. It just works really, really well, and it's really not too abusive as far as solvent to really hurt a lot of the stuff. So I like to use old fuel like that to clean things up. Nevertheless, it's not apple juice. No, I don't use that to build jet skis and different motors. So it's time to move forward. Like I said, this is a mess. Gotta get cleaned up. Alright guys, so moving forward, we got the shop somewhat cleaned up, and I'm going ahead and putting on the top end kit, as you can see here. I'm using a brand called Nomura. I believe that's how you say it. I've never actually heard of them before, but it was strange. Usually you'd see like WSM or SBT, Why Does It Go, people those nature, but I didn't see any of those when I was looking online. And so the kit that I bought was again from Nomura.com, and technically speaking I got it on eBay, but this was the kit that they had sent. Now overall the kit looks pretty good. Pistons look good. The skirts obviously are coated, as you would imagine. The rings are extremely thick. I mean, probably the thickest rings I've ever seen. And I know Sea-Doo is generally thicker than Yamaha and others, but this is nothing like the SBT stuff that used to be paper thin on Yamahas. These are extremely thick. And the other odd thing is you'll see how open they are right now. I imagine the reason for that, because they do close, is that they hold a good, nice, tight fit against the cylinder wall, which is obviously a good thing, and that's what you want. Never seen that before, so we're going to find out how great that is. The only thing that I see is a downside out of everything, because the gaskets look good too, is the retaining clips inside here are really, you can't really tell on obviously camera, but they look really thin. But I don't think it'd be a problem, because I don't see those traveling or moving out in any form, fashion, or whatsoever, so I think that'll be fine. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to throw in the base gasket. I got to get these cylinders back on top of the pistons. I did not separate them, so it's a little bit more work that way. But if I end up having to separate them, I got brand new gaskets for the exhaust. It doesn't really matter. So let me go ahead and throw those on. Okay, and so moving forward, I think I'm going to go ahead and separate the cylinders. The reason why is I know with these things being so tight and trying to fight against each other, I'll end up marring up the base gasket, which isn't good. So I'm just going to go ahead and separate them. Though I did want to point out one thing. I don't know how this compares to the other gaskets, but you'll see that the gaskets kind of push this way. I'm going to have to trim off this edge right here. Not a big deal, but obviously it's not a perfect fit. You can see there's a bit of offset there, so I got to get that trimmed. That's easy with a razor blade. Get these things separated, and then obviously I'll show you what it looks like when it's done. Alright, so moving forward, we got most of the top end right now on, and I wanted to point out one thing. A lot of guys just throw these cylinders over top of these pistons dry. You want to go ahead and take some two-stroke oil and rub it around the insides of your cylinders before you put it on. Otherwise, you're just grinding down metal on metal. They don't have no lubrication. It's kind of a bad idea. Thought I'd point that out there. But so far, everything's good. They turn over nice and smooth. The pistons go in nice and tight with those nice tight sealed rings. So we should get some pretty darn good compression out of this. There's a little dirt inside here build up from the whatever's coolant, whatever's been going through over the years, but that'll flush through as it's actually being run. I've got new gaskets to put on all this now, both here, and in the very top itself. So let me get all that put together, and this thing's gonna get ready for paint. Alright guys, so one more snag. I went to use the very top gasket this thing on, and you can see it's obviously way too large. I don't know if maybe the 657 is different from the 657X. This was listed as being for both. However, as you can see, it is not right, so the old one is going to have to go in. That's okay, there was nothing wrong with the old one. I just assumed, why not use the new if we got it? Oh well, time to move forward. Alright, top end is all back together. It's got great compression. Now it's time to throw on our rotary valve and get this thing timed. Then we're moving to paint. Stick around and wait to see what this color is going to look like. Okay guys, so moving forward, I got this thing as clean as it's possibly going to get, as this old thing is just filthy. But I wiped it all down with gas, let it dry out, and this is all the cleaner it's going to get. It's time to go ahead and spray it. I'm going to do a base of primer, and then we got a special color you'll see when it's all done. Yes, I'm painting it out back because I don't care. I've got so much stuff in the shop that I am not masking off and taping off. This will be perfectly fine out back as long as we keep the bugs away from it. So let's move forward and get to spraying. All right, guys, so there is our sour apple green metallic paint job on our Sea-Doo engine. Actually sprayed almost perfect until I just realized I missed that little tiny spot right there. Oh, well, I guess you won't see it. Doesn't really matter. Also, I was going to paint these things black, and I decided to just go ahead and spray them green because I had the paint. I didn't want to waste it. Didn't make sense to have to waste the paint, so I just sprayed them all green. I'm actually really surprised how well it turned out because there was so much moisture in line. When I first hooked up the gun, it squirted out like a squirt gun. I've never seen nothing like it because it's like, I don't know, it's got to be 400% humidity. It's nuts. So, but yeah, it turned out pretty good. So we're going to let it dry for a little bit, bring it back in the shop, and we're going to continue putting this thing together. Okay, so I got the motor sitting in here right now. I've already ran my first issue. The old FX I did this in years ago wasn't supercharged, and I think the drive shaft is different, and I'll show you what I mean. So if I'm looking at dead center here, that's about 18.5 inches on that tape measure, so that would make 9.25 inches dead center. You'll see our Sea-Doo is just about on that, but our coupler over here is more so on like 8.25. It's an inch this way. I've never seen that before. That could be because it was trying to make room for the supercharger. I'm not entirely sure why. But I'm going to have to figure out something, whether I use that coupler or not. I would imagine, looking through the back, that even the drive shaft lines up with that. Obviously, it must have been designed that way. Now, I have to imagine in the back that the back is fully lined, so I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but I still got more fitment to do. It's not just fitting the engine. Again, the exhaust has to fit too, so there's a lot of things to look at. I'm going to keep looking at things and figuring things out. All right, a couple noteworthy things to keep in mind. So this thing right here goes between those two white things, okay? That's actually a seal. Now, I'm forced to use this coupler up front, and the reason why is that if I don't, that coupler is actually what this is actual seal, and so water would travel straight from the tunnel right into the hull if I didn't use that coupler. So I am forced to use it. With that said, the coupler, I just got the actual coupler off that thing, off the midshaft, I should call it. And I was basically forced to use serious heat to get it off. It's got the white thread locker, which does not come off easy. Once you heat it up good enough, it'll pop right off without force, but you absolutely have to heat it to get it off. Now, with that said, you'll see that the drive shaft goes all the way through there. And I do remember when I did the Kawasaki conversion, I was able to notch that back just a hair so the threads would actually grab both a front shaft coming out of it and a rear. Now that's not going to work this time, and the reason why is the Sea-Doo shaft is not as big, so there's kind of a gap there, and I'll show you what that looks like. And you can kind of see what that gap is. So the downside here is either I'm going to have to weld this inside here, which I'm okay with. This part's not really that expensive. I just got to be careful not to wear that seal out that you see right there in the middle, or burn it out, I should say, if I weld it. The other thing is if I got another Kawasaki or Yamaha shaft, I could come from the other end. Now, I could talk to my guys at jetmotorsports.net, and they could probably hook us up, but I don't know that's the right route to go yet, so I don't want to assume that. So I'm going to throw a couple things around here. Before I get into that, I do want to get some of the motor mounts a little bit better lined up to better know how this thing's going to sit. And just for comparison, there is a Kawasaki drive shaft, also just slightly too small to use. I even tried an older Yamaha shaft. It's just not as big as the current Yamaha shafts. Alright guys, and so moving forward, while I'm waiting for a callback on some tubular steel so I can remount that engine, I'm going to go ahead and throw in the jet pump because there's no reason for it to be sitting out any longer. Alright, so the pump's back in. I have no idea what these bolts up here and the ones down in the corners are for, which is hard to see the ones in the corners. There you see one there. I don't know if that's for some kind of wake ballast or something, because I know it has a wake option, but I don't have anything to bolt to it. It looks like something's been bolted at one point, so it is what it is. All I know is that the rest of the reverse gate and the steering nozzle and everything's put together. The jet is in like it's supposed to be, and we're good there. Alright guys, I think I'm going to go ahead and call it a wrap for this particular video. Hopefully we'll get this thing wrapped up next week, so tune in next Friday for the next episode that will be coming out. Keep in mind, we do still have to do electrical, we have body work to do, and a few other things to get this thing wrapped up, and at the end of all that, we want to bring this thing to lake to see exactly what it could do. If you guys like the comment, definitely throw that thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click that subscribe button, and why not click that notification bell, because you know what, you're going to want to know when the next content is coming out on this series, and I'll see you in the next one.